Welcome to the Office of the Leader of the Opposition Press Conference for December 13, 2022. Today I will introduce my panel like I usually do from my right. To my right is none other than Member of Parliament Mr. Ganesh Maipal. To his right, the Leader of the Opposition Mr. Aubrey C. Norton, Member of Parliament. To his right, none other than Senior Counsel Mr. Royce Dulford, Member of Parliament. And to his right, Mr. Elson Lowe, Economist. Today's press statement will be read in four parts, and we will begin the reading of the press statement with the Leader of the Opposition.
Congratulations to the University of Guyana graduates. This opportunity is taken to congratulate all those who would have completed their studies at the University of Guyana and would have graduated. We wish you the best and hope that you would remain available to the people of Guyana for the development of Guyana. It is in this context that we wish to urge the government of Guyana to increase the wages and salaries of all public servants to not only ensure that they stay in Guyana, but that they can cope with the high cost of living. Visit to the quarantine. The discrimination continues. A recent visit to the quarantine by the opposition has revealed that the PPP regime continues to discriminate against villages they perceive to be supporters of the APNU AFC. At both Ulverston and Liverpool, the people noted that while in PPP strongholds all the streets are being done, in APNU AFC support areas little or no work is being done on the roads there. The residents pointed out that the PPP identifies individual Afro-Guyanese who they give the crumbs to and use them to seek to influence persons in the village to vote for the PPP. Most villagers understand this strategy of the PPP and reject it. In such circumstance, people are being threatened that if they do not vote for the PPP, their village will be starved of resources. This is a widening of the net to starve APNU AFC villages of resources, as is the case in the towns Linden, New Amsterdam, Bartica, Madia, and Georgetown. This strategy will continue to fail. The high-handedness of the Ministry of Public Works. The opposition condemns the Ministry of Public Works for intervening into the affairs of the city of Georgetown without any consultation with the elected representatives of the city. The mayor and city council and the opposition stand in full support of those vendors who are eking out a living in this very difficult post-COVID era. In the first place, we find it unconscionable that the Ministry of Public Works would seek to demolish their caravans. Secondly, it is most worrying that they are seeking to do it in the Christmas season when the ministry should be spreading joy rather than bringing misery on the people of Guyana. Thirdly, in the light of the high unemployment in Georgetown and Guyana generally, it does appear that the government does not care for the people of Georgetown and should know that they will pay dearly for their illegal actions against the people of Georgetown. The government should be creating employment, not destroying people's livelihood. The opposition hails those vendors who stood in the way of the PPP destruction of their livelihood. They continue to look forward to our support as they seek to earn an honest living. The PPP action in Georgetown must signal to the people of the capital city that they mean no good. If they can seek to override the elected council to carry out their destructive activities, then it should send a clear signal to the citizenry that they should never allow the PPP to control the mayor and city council. To do that is to give them total power to disregard the interests of the people. The PPP must end its witch hunt against Carol Smith-Joseph and APNU AFC supporters. The opposition APNU AFC condemns the PPP witch hunt against its members and supporters. The recent harassment and state violence against Carol Smith Joseph is one in a long list of state misusing its power against its political opponents. SOCU was established to deal with money laundering and other special crimes. The opposition believes that the allegations made against Barrett Jackleo can be considered special crimes. One would have expected that in keeping with SOCU's mandate, there would have been an investigation into the allegation of bribery and corruption allegedly committed by Vice President Jackleo. Clearly, SOCU's role seems to be to go after innocent people rather than those who are accused of being involved in criminal activity. A reliable source within SOCU has confirmed that the PPP is using that institution to go after its political opponents. We have been reliably informed that they are planning to target APNU AFC Member of Parliament, Mr. Sherrod Duncan, for trumped-up charges. The opposition is calling on the government and SOCU to focus its attention on the high crimes being committed by the PPP's elite, friends, families, and favorites.
Thank you. The other half of the statement will be read by Mr. Ganesh Naipal.
Thank you very much, Shanika. Our messages on UN International Human Rights Day and World Anti-Corruption Day. Last week, the APNU AFC joined the rest of the international community to mark International Anti-Corruption Day on Friday, 9th of December, and International Human Rights Day on Saturday, 10th of December. Given the dire situation in Guyana, citizens must give due attention to these observances. On International Anti-Corruption Day, our message called on Guyanese to unite to fight corruption in Guyana. We stated that, quote, as corruption becomes more entrenched in Guyana, fighting it now demands a united approach. Decent and patriotic citizens and organizations must all join forces against corruption, unquote. We also alerted Guyanese that corruption extends not only to bribery and the embezzlement of public funds, but also to trading in influence, abuse of public office, money laundering, obstructing justice, and private sector corruption. Our message emphasized that corruption is a plague that stunts economic development, impoverishes people, perverts the rule of law, turns public institutions into bribe-taking bureaucracies, deters foreign investment, and erodes democracy and human rights. It is in this context we must condemn the condoning of corruption by SOCU and the PPP elite, family, friends, and favorites. We warned that corruption is increasing and worse, normalizing in Guyana. One of the main causes continue to be the purposeful weakening or sidelining of anti-corruption institutions by the current government. For example, the PPP government politicizes anti-corruption institutions such as the Special Organized Crime Unit, SOCU, and the police force in general. It stalls and stymies the work of other institutions, such as the delayed reconstituting of the Public Procurement Commission, the non-confirmation of the Chief Justice and Chancellor of the Judiciary, and reducing the schedule of and its attendance at the Public Accounts Committee. Further, the PPP degrades or sidelines institutions such as the Commissioner of Information and the Oversight Parliamentary Sectoral Committees. We wish to point out to the Guyanese people that the PPP changed the quorum of the Public Accounts Committee to ensure that when it stays away from PAC meetings, their accounts cannot be scrutinized. The opposition condemns this deliberate sabotage of the Public Accounts Committee by this corrupt PPP regime. The PPP's approach is dangerous. But just as dangerous is the government attitude that signals that it condones corruption within its own inner circle and among its political cronies. The Sugate scandal, for example, exposed ample and credible allegations of corruption against Vice President Bharat Jagdeo and other high officials, yet the government still refuses to investigate. Our Anti-Corruption Day message urged citizens, and I quote, to come together as a people to fight corruption in all its forms and against all enablers and perpetrators. With every success against PPP corruption, we will gradually remove the major obstacles to a better quality of life for ourselves, our families, all Guyanese, unquote. On International Human Rights Day, we urged our fellow citizens to join the international call to stand up for human rights. For us in Guyana, this call comes at a time when our political, social, and economic rights are increasingly disregarded and assaulted by an arrogant and dictatorial government. We took the opportunity to remind citizens of the human rights guaranteed in our Constitution. In particular, Article 41 states, quote, every person in Guyana is entitled to the basic right to a happy, creative, and productive life, free from hunger, ignorance, and want. That right includes the fundamental rights and freedoms of the individual, unquote. Indeed, the Constitution guarantees us over 30 fundamental rights and freedoms, inclusive of 1. Freedom of expression, conscience, movement, association, and assembly. 2. Freedoms from discrimination, inhumane treatment, and deprivation of poverty. 3. Rights to life, personal property, and free education. And 4. Equity and equality of women, indigenous peoples, status, and of all persons before the law. Our message advocates that as we strive towards the full realization of these entitlements, we concurrently must protect our gains and restore our losses. We stated that under the current government, several rights and freedoms are in crisis, such as our freedom of expression and conscience. Note the fear of many persons of being victimized should they openly criticize the government. Freedom from discrimination, such as in contract awards and cash transfer. Freedom from deprivation of poverty, such as the seizure of ancestral and communal lands by government. Right to personal liberty, as seen by the abuse of police powers of search, arrest, and detention, and as recent as the opposition's chief election scrutineer, Carl Smith Joseph, being the latest victim, and the rights of our indigenous people, as witnessed by the government's disrespect of their rights to be consulted on matters of direct concern to them. We invite Guyanese to also recognize that in standing up for their rights, our Constitution guarantees not only political and social rights, but also economic rights. As our oil wealth makes us one of the richest countries in the world, the right, and this right in particular, can and must be realized. But only a government that cares about people can deliver these rights. Thank you.
Thank you. The other part of the statement will be read by Senior Counsel, Mr. Ron Guilford.
the award of government contracts still heavily favors one set of Guyanese over others. The recently published figures on the distribution of government contract awards across ethnic groups in Guyana, while surprising no one, is nevertheless of immense value and give credence to the opposition's contentions that there is discrimination in the award of contracts. The confirmation it provides on this aspect of ethnic discrimination inequalities allows Guyanese to fully reject the deception of those who request to see the evidence. We need to address the gross imbalance in the award of government contracts, both in terms of the amount of persons getting contracts and the money value of those contracts. We have seen frail attempts to give small contracts in the light of the criticisms, but no attempt to address the inequities in the earnings from those contracts. It would be remiss of us not to commend the initiators of the survey. We also commend the media outlets that have published the results and urge others to follow suit. The ending of discrimination demands national involvement. Let us recall that the award of government contracts, or public procurement, was a Herdmanston issue, which means that in the aftermath of the 1997 election and public protest, the award of government contracts with the attendant discrimination and exclusion were explicitly identified by all stakeholders as a matter of central importance for race relations, social justice, and equal opportunity in Guyana. The 1999 Constitutional Reform Commission agreed, therefore, to establish the Public Procurement Commission as a body with constitutional powers to address this serious national problem. But the PPP, during its previous term in office, thwarted both the establishment and the effective functioning of the PPC. In fact, it was under the coalition government in 2016 that the Public Procurement Commission was re-established after a decade under the PPP. With the existence of the Public Procurement Commission, the PPP is awarding contracts in a highly arbitrary manner and in violation of the Public Procurement Act. The imbalance in the award of contracts today is therefore the outcome of previous decades of discrimination, victimization, and marginalization. Barajagios knows this, and his recent nonsensical defense of the glaring inequities and inequalities in the awards of contracts have fooled no one. Excluded groups cannot participate or successfully compete in the public procurement because the PPP never allowed them fair and equal opportunity to develop any track record or financial and technical capability and competencies. In stating these facts, we do not cast blame on the many successful contractors who simply played by the rules that Freedom House designed for its own narrow political gains. We need to seriously resolve these unjust and unconstitutional disparities in contract awards. The Public Procurement Commission must join us to work towards building a public procurement system that, while remaining competitive, can at the same time include special measures to correct previous discrimination, inequalities, and injustices by opening the door for wider participation for underrepresented and marginalized groups in our society, thus distributing the economic wealth of the country in a way that promotes social and economic justice and harmony. Thank you.
Thank you. The other part of the statement will be read by Mr. Elson Lowe.
Thank you and good morning. Last week, the government deceived the Guyanese nation by announcing that the auction of Guyana's remaining oil blocks has begun without the promised public consultations. This deception recalls the insightful remark of Joseph Pulitzer, after whom the Pulitzer Prize is named. There is not a crime, there is not a dodge, there is not a trick, there is not a swindle, there is not a vice which does not live by secrecy. In much the same way that the changes to the nation's Natural Resources Fund were announced before being rushed through the National Assembly, the PUP intends to release the new model PSA and then hastily sign a deal with an oil company. The full new model PSA must be released immediately. the PPP's strategy and corrupt motives are obvious. Why else the secrecy? It is absurd that the country could accept bids for oil blocks without the public knowing exactly what the agreement that governs those oil blocks will look like. As an example, the government has indicated that the new royalty rate will be 10%. But will that be cost recoverable? It might seem beyond imagination that the government would make the royalty it receives cost recoverable. But the PPP has done just that in previous oil agreements. In fact, it is the coalition who had to correct this in the Stabroek Block Agreement. This is even more troubling when we hear the second vice president assure the public that there will be consultations on the new PSA's terms. The PPP makes such remarks casually, as if unaware that in the normal course of governance, consultations are one of the first steps that must be undertaken. As a result of this pernicious approach, the consultations will have very little time to take place before the auction is over. Of course, this was the PPP's plan all along. If this were not bad enough, the country still does not know exactly how bidders will be evaluated and who will evaluate them, among many other vital questions. Even matters as obviously complex as the sizing of the blocks has not been publicly ventilated. Is there a government policy document on this issue? Or did they just wake up one morning and decide to make some oil blocks peculiarly tiny? There are good reasons for oil blocks to be larger rather than smaller. But best of all would be a proper study of the issue. For these and many other reasons, we previously called for the release of the full terms of this auction. We reiterate that call now. It is critical that Guyanese have full confidence in any auction, much less one where tens of billions of dollars are potentially at stake. The last time the PPP awarded oil blocks, the awards were mired in controversy. The PPP appears intent on a repeat of this chaos. Given Guyana's huge oil reserves, we want to help each and every citizen understand that transparency and accountability are the difference between ceaseless poverty and vast riches. If we do a poor job in this upcoming oil block auction, the nation will lose out on tens of billions of US. Those funds can easily ensure current and future generations live comfortably. Alternatively, they can enrich PPP cronies, some of whom will surely show up for the oil block auction. It is clear for Guyana to grow, the PPP must go. In summary, the APNUAFC demands on behalf of the people of Guyana that 1. The entire model PSA must be immediately and publicly released. 2. The terms of the auction must be immediately and publicly released. And 3. There must be proper public and parliamentary consultations to inform the finalization of both documents. The people of Guyana demand no less. Thank you.
Thank you. All right, at this time we will take questions on the press statement. And as is customary, you'll do so by the raise of hand. Any questions on the press statement?
Yeah. Good morning.
Go ahead, Mr. Harris. Good
Um,
morning.
the first question is for Mr. Manpaul. Now, sir, you were talking about meeting of the Public Accounts Committee not being held and all of that. What is, I mean, you cannot call it an official meeting, you can't, because you will have a quorum. But what's there to stop you from going ahead with a meeting of the Public Accounts Committee just for the records, to release some of the findings you get, although you can't document them as an official meeting?
Well, thank you very much, Adam. Before the passage of that motion, that notorious motion that was tabled by Gail Teixeira sometime in April of this year, for there to be a change to the quorum of the Public Accounts Committee, the quorum was any 3 members. The Public Accounts Committee consists of 5 members from the government side and 4 from the opposition side, of which the chairman must come from the opposition. And the quorum before April of this year was any 3 members. What has happened, the government brought the motion, as you know, it is publicly ventilated. Gail Teixeira came with a motion, and because they have that 1-seat majority in the National Assembly, the motion was passed, it became a resolution. For us to sit as a committee to deliberate on any matters pertaining to public accounts in this country, there must be 2 members of the government side, 2 members of the opposition side, and the chairman of the committee. Unless that happens, we cannot meet as a committee. The parliament staff will not be there, the clerk of committee will not be there, the support staff from parliament will not be there. So even if we attempt to sit in the National Assembly in the place where the PAC is convened and attempt to go and discuss and deliberate, and we request information and so on, by right, the support staff and so on, if they choose not to participate, they will have a right to not participate. And we do not want to, at the same time, we are a law-abiding political organization. And we would not want to force any staff at the National Assembly or anybody to go against what was approved by the National Assembly, even though we believe that it was done specifically to stop or slow down the progress and process and the line of work of the Public Accounts Committee. At the end of the day, it's a resolution of the House. But what I will tell you and the viewers, is that it is clear, crystal clear now more than ever, that the People's Progressive Party does not want this country to know what is it that the Auditor General unearthed in the 2020 Auditor General's report and the 2021 Auditor General's report. And in September of 2023, we will have the 2022 Auditor General's report. Without a doubt, Adam and viewers, there is allegations of widespread corruption in all of these government ministries and regions. And we have heard of many. I can go as far as to tell you that the opposition, the APNU AFC, will sooner rather than later, bring these findings out to the public, and we will deliberate on it in the public space, since the government seems to believe that them not coming to PAC will stop us. We will show them it will not. Thank you.
Thank you. I see the hand up.
Sorry,
Go ahead.
one quick follow-up.
Go ahead.
Can the opposition meet at any forum? I know you have the facility to get this issue out on social media. Can you have an examination of the accounts at your own forum? Raise the questions that you would normally raise at the PAC and provide your own answers. In short, can you provide the public with what is happening and what are some of the questions and issues that would attract your attention?
That is exactly what we will have to do. And that is exactly what our next move will be. The Public Accounts Committee members on the opposition side will meet, we will go public, and we will invite all viewers, and even the media will receive an invitation, and we will expose what was unearthed by the Auditor General, we will discuss it, we will deliberate on it, and we will say what we believe should be done to ensure that there is no reoccurrence. And if there is need for us to name, shame, and blame people attached to the People's Progressive Party in the act of corruption, we will have to do just that.
Thank you. All right, I see the hand of Ms. Tamika Rodney. Ms. Rodney, your volume is a bit low. We are hardly hearing you.
Louder now?
Better.
A little better.
All right.
Yes.
Mr. Mahifal, question goes to you. Just for clarity, Minister Teixeira would have stated on this matter of the government members absenting themselves from the PAC, she would have indicated that they resisted combining the 2019 and 2020 reports. Can you say why your party wants to combine the assessment of those two reports?
Thanks, Tamika. I've said many times, and I'm going to say it again. We must never allow ourselves to fall prey to the distraction of the People's Progressive Party and their wicked way of trying to divert from the issue at hand. There is no doubt that the Public Accounts Committee in the last Parliament, which was the 11th Parliament, failed to meet regularly to be up to date with the Auditor General's report. I believe in the 11th Parliament, the Public Accounts Committee did not meet at all in 2019, and they did not meet for a portion in 2018 also. So that caused the reports to back up. And the last report the 11th Parliament deliberated on when Irfan Ali was the chairman of PAC was the 2016 report, and they did not complete that. So when we came in 2020, we had to go and revisit the 2016 Auditor General's report, complete what is it that Irfan and his team left, and then we had to move to 2017 and 18. The merging of these reports is nothing strange to the Public Accounts Committee. In fact, we can go as far back as when Carl Greenidge was chairman of the Public Accounts Committee, and I believe that was the 10th Parliament. And we can see that they merged reports of the Auditor General report. I think they merged 2009 and 2010 report together. I believe 2011 and 2012 were merged together also. Under Irfan Ali's chairmanship at PAC, reports were also merged. I believe it was 2013 and 14 that were merged under Irfan Ali's tenure. And the idea behind merging these reports is so that we can be up to date with the Auditor General's report. So when we deliberate and when we make recommendations, it will be applicable to the accounting officers of today. And that is what we want. If our country wants accountability and transparency, then we have to provide the guidance to the people who are holding the offices today. Now, I heard that Gail Teixeira, and I think it was Edgil, said something that they don't want to merge 2018 and 2019 because 2019 had no oversight, the spending, and something but a no confidence motion, and that is hogwash. Because what we are deliberating on, my friends, is the findings of the Auditor General. And the findings of the Auditor General is documented in his report. We are not going outside of the findings of the Auditor General. So the very questions that we will ask pertaining to the 2018 report, we can ask for the 2019 report too. What really is the merge that we talk about? The merge is we bring the accounting officers at the respective ministries, regions, and departments one day, and that day they will answer questions pertaining to 2018 report and at the same time or simultaneously 2019 report. Nothing else. It is not depriving no member of the PAC from asking a question pertaining to any of reports. What we will do as members of the PAC, we will have the two reports in front of us, the 2018 and 2019. We will have a paragraph from 2018 that we want to question, and we can very well have a paragraph from 2019 that we want to question. And we will question the accounting officers. All that it will do is lengthen the time that the accounting officer stays to answer the questions, because they will be answering two separate reports. It does not take away anything else. And you know what that will do further, Temika? It will save this country of resources, financial resources. Because every time we bring out an accounting officer from Region 9 or anywhere around this country, it is the Parliament and people of Guyana who has to stand the cost. So if we are bringing them one time to answer questions pertaining to 2 years, how different is that from bringing them two separate times to answer these very questions? Ms. Teixeira and her crew are only trying to slow down the work of the PAC. They want us to spend a lot of time behind 2018 and 2019 whilst they continue to engage in corrupt practices, and the people of Guyana will not be able to get it officially from the PAC, because when 2024 reach, we could very well be still dealing with 2018 report. 2025, which is expected to be election year, we will be dealing with 2019 report, and we will not get the chance to examine at the PAC their 2020, 2021, 2022, 2023, and 2024 years of corruption. And that is what they are running from. They are running from that, and we must never fall prey and allow them to hoodwink us in this distraction politics that they love to engage in. I trust I clarified for you.
Thank you. Any other questions on the press statement? All right.
But nobody else?
Go ahead, Mr. Harris.
Consider you were on the quarantine and you met with a lot of people and you said they talked about the election. Now, the regional system, doesn't it work there? You have representatives on the RDC, and I'm sure that development programs would have involved them. But when these people are going out for contracts, having these contracts been passed through the RDC so that they could question them and see what is happening, rather than you having to go up there to see for yourself and then make the announcement?
First of all, the RDC is controlled by the People's Progressive Party. They are practicing a lot of nepotism and cronyism. The people complain that there are times when a family in the NDC is in control of the pumps, etc., and they don't go to African Guyanese community. For instance, in Ulverston, we were shown the drains that were not cleaned since we left government. We were informed about the behavior of the government, both central and regional. For instance, many of them will tell you that they are not consulted, particularly those that are controlled by the APNU AFC. They are not allowed to make decisions on behalf of the people. But not only there in the country, all over when you go, they are telling you that Minister Dharamlal in total violation of the law, is directing how the money should be spent, the subvention. And that also has been a problem. And then what they do is they go into the area, identify somebody who they are financing to look at, to operate as PPP. For instance, we were told, I think it was in Liverpool or Manchester, that the PPP person there is going around telling people that are squatting on lands owned privately that the APNU didn't regularize it, but they will regularize it. Now, first of all, if it is private lands, the government has no say over it. And it is wickedness to tell people who are squatting there that vote for them and they will regularize it. And that is a concern that has been raised, and we have informed some of the people, and I intend to go back to speak to them to let them know that these are private lands and they are being fooled by the People's Progressive Party, or the People's Progressive Party will turn for the worse and decide that they will take private property to facilitate people who they perceive to have followed their instruction. Now, across the quarantine, we were driving and they were showing you they're doing over roads that were already done. Roads that were done under the AP and UAFC, they're doing them over in PPP strongholds. But then, when it comes to roads in AP and UAFC stronghold, they aren't. They went as far, one person went as far to suggest to us that the only reason that they would have done one road in Ulverston is because some of the people living in that street are supporters of the PPP. But if you look at the entire community, all the roads are terrible. And so it is evident that the NDC is not allowed to do its job. You heard Vice President Jagdeo, or President whatever he is, said that they're doing more, I think 282 or 182 roads in the quarantine. When you go, you will see that they're only doing them in areas they consider themselves to have support. And so when we say the discrimination continues on the quarantine, it continues to be barefaced as well.
All right. If there are no other questions on the press statement, I will open up the floor.
Before you open the floor, the question that Adam asked there just now also has to do with the local, respect for the local democratic organs. And I cannot help but to say that what you saw last night happening at Newmarket Street there, where no less a person than the mayor of Georgetown had to literally put himself, is not gazetted as a public road, and it does not fall under the remit of the Ministry of Public Infrastructure or Public Works. It falls under the remit of the mayor and councillors of Georgetown. And if the city mayor and councillors sat at their horseshoe table, made a decision in keeping with 2801, which is the chapter that deals with them and allows them to make decisions. And mind you, local democracy and local democratic organs are not, and Roysdale could guide me here, they're not secondary laws. These organizations are catered for in the Constitution, the supreme law. From chapter 70 to 78, I think, gives exclusive rights to these local democratic organs and for them to have control over the network in terms of roads, in terms of drainage, in terms of all the other aspects of local governance to them.
Let me.
And the fact that Bishop Edgell had the audacity to intervene, disrespect the local authority area and do what he did, it is greater than that issue too. This is a matter of a clear violation of the Constitution, a clear disrespect for elected officials at the level of our local democratic organs. And I have to blame Irfan Ali because Edgell falls under his watch. And if he is continuously talking about wanting a united Guyana, wanting a one Guyana and all of these craziness, and look at the actions of his ministers, look at the action of Edgell and what he is doing, Irfan has to take the blame for these things. And we will continue to be a Guyana that is divided, where one set of people is treated one way, another set is treated another way, where resources are going to one set that looks like me, and resources are not going to one set that doesn't look like me, where the rich is becoming richer, and where the poor is becoming poorer. We will continue to be a Guyana like that if we don't respect what is enshrined in our Constitution.
May I also add, Adam, last evening I was out there with the vendors talking with them. And I recognized that wickedness was afoot. When I was speaking with the vendors said to me that they were going, I think, and I said, why? They said because they said they're going to come tomorrow morning. And I said to the vendors then, I'd recommend we leave people out here because I know the PPP. I know the wickedness of Juan Edgell. Juan Edgell is such a liar that he goes into the parliament and tells parliament that he did a particular road in Linden, and when you went, he didn't do 100 feet. But I back to the issue. So when they told me that the council told, the ministry said it was okay, they come in the morning, I told them, I said, from political experience, we must have people out here. Because they will tell you that, and they can come 4-day morning to destroy your property. So said, so done. And so there is an orchestrated wickedness by this regime. They're doing the same thing in Makkah, trying to deceive people and then turn up and break down their building. Now, Irfan Ali needs to stop talking about one Guyana, because all the evidence is suggesting that they are creating two Guyanas. And mind you, a lot of what is happening on Newmarket Street is linked to one or two PPP business persons who believe that people that are vending have no right to vend, even if they aren't in conflict with their business. And so we have to see this for what it is. It's part of the PPP regime wickedness aimed at ensuring that our constituencies do not enjoy life. Like we said in the press release, this is a time when you should be sharing joy, when you don't disrupt the life of Christians and Christian-oriented people. But what the government chooses to do, 2 weeks before Christmas, and not even fully 2 weeks, before Christmas, you decided people are going to, caravans are going to be destroyed. You're going to stop them from earning 2 weeks before Christmas to place them in misery where they cannot mind their children. This government task is to create employment, not destroy. And so I think we need to put those on records, because these are not acts that are occurring whimsically. These are well-planned, orchestrated wickedness on the part of Irfan Ali Jackdeo and the PPP. And unfortunately, the likes of Juan Edgell is facilitating this level of disrespect and discrimination. But they say he who pays the piper calls the tune.
On that note, Shanik, if I could make a statement here. I think it's pretty ironic that on the same night that we're hearing that healthcare workers are finally getting the raise that so many of them deserve, and we expect that you should be getting that and more, you're seeing the destruction of the vendors who are right opposite the healthcare workers, almost as if to say that they are not allowed to benefit as these funds go through the economy, which I think is quite sad. But one of the things we really want to highlight as we see these raises, some of which amount to around about 50%, is that the difference between the last government budget and this one, the increase, when you account for supplementals and so on, is around about 50%. And so clearly the PPP has demonstrated that the types of large increases that we have been calling for all year are very much possible, very much possible. And I would say to public servants across the spectrum that you must ask the PPP, where is your 50%? Because if the budget increased by 50%, doesn't that imply that you, in order to keep pace with the budget, should get your 50%? Now, of course, we know that there are some members of the media here who may be public servants, and I would ask you, where is your 50%? That's maybe when you get back to your offices, you should have a look at your managers, and your managers should have a look at their managers, kind of ask each other, where's the 50%? Now, of course, the reason that PPP cannot give everybody an increase that is in core with the increase in the national budget is because they have to set aside funds to steal, right? And so essentially, there's a cost to corruption. And the cost is that you are not getting your 50%. In the media, across the public service, that is the reason. And so if, let's say, that you're making a $200,000 a month, and you were going to get a $100,000 increase, and that was going to be a retroactive increase over the 12 months, man, that's $1.2 million. Can you imagine that the PPP has robbed you of over $1 million? We have indicated in previous press conferences that this is a wealthy country. We've got all sorts of questions about budget deficits and inflation, and yet here we see evidence that you can have a substantial increase. Where is the increase for other categories of public servant? Where is it? Every single public servant should go and look at the managers, and the managers should look at the managers, and the managers should look at the ministers, and they need to get an answer as to why they have not got an increase that is at the same rate that the budget has increased. Where have the funds gone? Teachers, where are your funds? Police officers, you got an increase, but that increase was an embarrassment. We now know what we have been saying all year is the truth. The country is immensely wealthy. We can afford to make public servants' lives better. It is a deliberate choice by the government not to do so. And the reason for that is because they have to hold back some of the money to steal it. There is a cost to corruption. And you see that today, in that you have been robbed of $1.2 million. And so I hope that when you return back to your offices, you start looking for this $1.2 million, because I don't know if it's under the desk or where it is, but it is yours and you're entitled to it. Thank you.
Thank you. I see the hand of Ms. Davina.
Hi, good afternoon, everyone.
Good afternoon.
I have a question for Mr. Norton. Sir, there seems to be some confusion in terms of what Guyana's total share is from the oil and gas revenue that's being earned. Exxon has placed several billboards across the country purporting that we're getting 52%, but the AFC has said that this is misleading. Can you state your position, and can you explain exactly what Guyana is getting from the Stabber Block PSA?
I'm not so sure what is it you're trying to get at. First of all, I understand that we had negotiated, and under us we had managed to make some changes so there's some more income because some of it has been removed from being recoverable. In terms of saying exactly what amounts we're getting, I will allow Elson to deal with that because he's dealing with those figures. What I can say, however, is this. One, we have consistently said that we believe Guyanese should benefit and benefit more. Two, we said that there is a clause in the agreement that permits the government to engage ExxonMobil with the aim of having a better deal. We have also pointed out that it is not solely a question of getting a better deal, but we also have got to look at, when we get a better deal, how are the people of Guyana going to benefit? A lot of us keep making noise about a better deal, and I think there's need for a better deal. But I'm also concerned that you have the money there, but the people aren't benefiting from it because their life is getting worse. And I would also like to see a focus on not only getting the money, but what is done with the money when we get it. Because you can have an increase in this money, and all you do is increase the corruption. And so we have to begin to look at this thing holistically. A mere increase in income will not necessarily result in a better quality of life for the people of Guyana. And we are interested in our people getting a better quality of life. We also believe that in this process of dealing with the earnings that come from oil and gas, that there is scope through some amount of ring fencing to ensure that we pay only for that which we ought to pay for, and that there is not the opportunity to bring in other expenditure, and therefore we lose income. In terms of the figures element of it, I'll ask Elson to deal with that.
Yes, thank you very much. Happy to respond. It's important for us always to clarify that there's a difference between revenue and profits. Guyana is not getting 52% of the revenue, and we're getting 52%, or just around about that, a little bit more, of the profits. Now that is because, of course, cost oil, that is the cost of development, exploration, and production, must first be removed, and then we get 52% of the profits there. If you'll recall, in most industries, governments will tax the profits of companies and not their revenue. Reason being that a company may not even, the cost that a company may be facing may be so large that that's not the appropriate way to go about it. And so we are getting 52% of the profits on the face of it. However, one of the things that we believe really must be stressed is that the importance, the reason that an audit is so vital is that it is possible, we don't know if that's the case, but it is possible the costs are being inflated. If indeed the costs are being inflated, then we could easily be getting 30 or 40% out of this deal as opposed to the 50% that we're supposed to be getting. So this needs to be properly done. We've seen the government produce, or at least they're about to release an audit that has very serious questions about whether or not it will even address what the plain words of the PSA say, which is that we can only have costs recovered if they are reasonable costs, if they are competitive costs. So we have to see that audit, and we have to scrutinize that, and we need the government to come clean as to what exactly they have asked these auditors to do. Because it could very well be that the country is getting much less than the words of the PSA say that it should get. And in fact, even if, pointed out, even if we were to renegotiate and we don't address the auditing issue, you could end up with exactly the same 30 or 40%. All that will happen is that the cost will be inflated by more than that. And so one of the things that, of course, we want to add some perspective to this discussion. There are studies that indicate that one of the reasons that Africa has struggled to develop is because of these types of questions around the auditing of the costs and around nations getting what it is that they should get. So it has been an international question that has raised concern. And while, of course, we would look forward to an audit that will indicate that Exxon is in full compliance with the law and so on, this is something that we do not know, the government does not know. The audit will help us to get a sense of it. And then if we see that there's a problem, we will call for an investigation. But to say that we are getting 52%, to say that we're not getting 52% is unclear until there is an audit. That is why we must audit. And so we just want to make sure that the Guyanese public kind of understands the dynamics of this and understands really why we keep stressing that it is totally unacceptable that the government just kind of, first of all, doesn't seem to be interested in audit, lets the audit deadline pass, and then when the audit comes, there's a question as to whether it's even exercising the rights of the country itself, the full rights of the country. So this audit issue is not an issue that's going to go away. This is the first major audit. We've had a previous pre-contract cost audit. We're going to have many audits over the history of Guyana going forward, and each and every one of those audits needs to be one that guarantees the Guyanese people that they're getting what they're supposed to be getting out of the contract with Exxon.
If I may, Divina, and I know that Elson did it very, very well for you to understand and come with leader with his comments, but I want to speak directly to the viewers who may not understand the technical jargons, who may not understand the, the big words and so on, because all Guyanese must have an appreciation and an acceptance for what really this 52% means. And I want to demonstrate it with an animation. So if this is the total revenue, this piece of paper, this all four corners, it borders the total revenue that our country is getting from oil. It means that this total paper here, this border, this amount of money here, is cost oil plus profit oil. So the 52% that they talk about, you have to first take away cost oil. Take that away. And this is what you're left with. And from this, there is where the 50% profit comes. The 50% profit comes. And from the other half, you take a little 2% from it. You take a little 2% from it. So this is what Guyana is getting. This is what they mean by 52%, as opposed to the total revenue, which goes elsewhere. So the 52% that they speak of, they have to explain it a little bit more for the ordinary Guyanese to understand. It is 50% of the profit and the 2% royalty. So it is just a portion or a small piece, a fraction of the entire total revenue that comes from our oil. So the AFC is correct when they say that the nation is being misled to believe it's 52% of the total revenue. It is not 52% of the total revenue.
There is, it should also be noted that the big concern is cost oil. If you don't have the capacity to audit, monitor, and ensure you're paying the actual cost of oil, what many are contending is that you could be robbed as it relates to cost oil. For those persons who attended university, etc., they tend to know when they are studying multinational corporations that they are so large and have so many components that they can be taking something from one of their own subsidiaries and inflating the costs. What that would mean is that we will be losing. Now, we are not against ExxonMobil or against anybody, but what we are saying, we must do everything to get the exact cost of oil so that the people of Guyana can benefit. If we get the exact cost of oil
at market price,
at the correct price, then profit oil could increase or be larger if there's a case of us being fleeced. So it's a very complex but simple issue in the sense that we have got, and here is where I'm very critical of the government. The government is showing no interest in developing the capacity of Guyana to be able to understand cost side, have the technical capabilities to do the audit, do all the checks, so that in the final analysis, the people of Guyana benefit, while at the same time, ExxonMobil benefiting based on the contractual agreement.
Thank you.
Thank you very much for that. Chair, I have two other questions. Can I go ahead quickly?
Yes, you can.
All right, thank you. Mr. Norton, this one again is for you. Well, I think these other two are directed to you as well. Sir, I'm aware that the opposition has not submitted a nominee to sit on a local content advisory committee, although you were invited to by the Ministry of Natural Resources. Can you explain why this position? And secondly, Guyana was recently ranked second to last in the region for access to quality healthcare by the IDB. What are your thoughts on this, especially since billions have been spent over the years in this sector?
First of all, I received no letter from the Minister of Natural Resources. He claimed that he has delivered a letter. I noticed they said they delivered one sometime in January before I became leader of the opposition. And then he's claiming that one was delivered now. I have not received that letter. And so I couldn't respond to it. So much so for that. As it relates to health care, the first thing we must understand is that the Constitution of Guyana is clear. Health should be free in Guyana. First point, the Constitution makes that clear. The second point I think we need to understand is that expenditure under the PPP is not expenditure that the people benefit from. A lot of it goes into corruption. I think I was going through one of the audit reports and I saw where we had paid for I think it's this last one that should cover the PPP period, where we had paid for pharmaceuticals, which until now we have not obtained. And so clearly, billions of dollars are budgeted for health, but are not meeting the people. Secondly, there seems to be a well-orchestrated approach by the PPP to use those who are close to them and let them purport to be delivering pharmaceuticals, etc., while in fact they are not delivering, they are just making money through corrupt practices. So I think essentially we cannot look at the budgetary allocations to determine what is happening. We have to look at the reality. And when you look at the reality on the ground, many of the health institutions that are supposed to have pharmaceuticals should have a certain amount of nurses, doctors, etc. In fact, I think Irfan Ali hurtled to make announcements about health care because people are leaving in droves. They don't have any medicines, etc., to give to the people. They are not getting a proper salary. They are not getting proper working conditions. And so, at the same time, overseas institutions began recruiting again, and a lot of Guyanese are going abroad for a better life. I believe that pushed this regime to identify increases for our health workers. Now, I believe that there must be those increases because we have argued for them. But we also believe that it should be given to all public servants. You cannot choose one sector at the expense of the other. You are creating conflict. Rather than talking about one Guyana, you're creating many Guyanas. Because you now would have left the teachers asking, well, what we do, make we can get. The lecturers at the University of Guyana is what we do, make we could only get 8%. And it points to the fact that the government is visionless. it has no plan. If you have a human resource development plan, you will know part of it will be wages and salaries that allow people to live a comfortable life. We have been talking about an APN UAFC government giving our people the minimum livable income. We believe if the government looks at what is the minimum livable income, they will recognize that all Guyanese, except probably the president and ministers, need a proper increase, because the levels of wages and salaries have left most people in Guyana below the poverty line. But the PPP doesn't have to worry. They are giving all of these contracts to PPP friends, family, and the PPP elite, and so they are getting back money from it, and they could afford health. It is the small man on the ground who cannot afford, who is suffering. And so I want to say here, please do not look at the allocation of resources in the budget as an indication of where we should be health-wise. I believe the report is correct, because when you go on the ground, the resources that should meet our people in the health sector are not meeting the people. It is compounded with a dissatisfied workforce because of the treatment meted out to them under the People's Progressive Party. So I think it is a reflection of the reality, and this government is not a government that is people-centered. This government is a government bent on putting resources in the hands of the PPP elite, their friends, families, and favorites, while the people of Guyana punish. And that is the reality.
And just for some specifics, Davina, the Auditor General's report of 2021 found that with reference to the Ministry of Health, there was a total amount of $1.915 billion, which was paid for drugs and medical supplies, but not delivered. And of that amount, only 9.294 million were covered by bank guarantees. That simply means that should the suppliers default on the supply of drugs and medical supplies, the ministry will find it difficult to recover the difference of $1.906 billion. So we must not be fooled by the budget. I think Comrade Ford wants to say something too.
I just wanted to add that, we have said time and time again, and I believe the government continues to act in a way that justifies our claim and our contention that the government is one lacking in equity and is filled and practices deception on a daily basis. Now, I believe personally that the President's announcement last night, his abrupt announcement of the increase in wages and salaries for members of the health sector, is largely to overshadow the report, which he knew existed in relation to the IDB and the poor quality of health care received by the Guyanese people. It was a clear attempt to overshadow that, and I believe that brings into question the thoughtfulness or the lack thereof and the obvious lack of sincerity to really address the issues of public servants across the board. Because the President announces from time to time that this program of One Guyana, but within the public sector, he engages in a division, he engages in a gross disparity in the wages and salaries of public servants, of One Guyana public servants. So while the public service, the policemen are to receive an 8% increase, the members of the health sector are to receive a great increase. Is it that the policemen are not sufficiently contributing to the quality of life across the country as the health sector? These are the sort of issues which demonstrates the lack of thoughtfulness on the part of the government and brings to demonstrate clearly the lack of the commitment to this One Guyana, because you cannot be providing different salaries for different public servants, especially at a time when they're all gripped and suffering from the poor economic practices and policies of the PPP regime. On the area of deception, our press conferences today and on previous occasions would have brought this question clearly out in public. And today I want to deal with another manifestation of the obvious deception of the PPP. The government has announced, I believe, and it was reported in Saturday, the 10th of December newspaper, Starbuck News, I believe, that the government plans to award a contract to the building of a gas plant to a company that they refer to as a company out of Texas, and they give the name as Linsayca, Lindsayca, and they said it is a Texas company. But examination would reveal that this company, Linsayca, Lindsayca, is owned by a company of a name Lindsay CA, Lindsayca, capital CA, which is a Venezuelan company. And I believe that this brings into question the sincerity and the openness, the lack of transparency in areas with which the Guyanese peoples and the resources are being spent. The Guyanese people deserve to know that this government finds it wise, appropriate to spend billions of US dollars for a gas plant to be built by a Venezuelan company at a time when we continue to engage in very icy relations between Venezuela and Guyana. I believe that this sort of planning, if it is to be done by a Venezuelan company, requires the government to come clear and to tell the Guyanese people, why are you going to be spending so much billions of dollars to be spent to build a gas plant by a Venezuelan company, a gas plant by itself which has been brought into question in terms of the health care, the impact on the Guyanese community, the impact on the environment, and is further shrouded by the wickedness, deception of the government to bring in a Venezuelan company, to pay them billions of dollars to build a gas plant.
There are some other issues that we also need to raise. When a government produces what is called the largest budget in the history of the country, and then they have to come back for 88, close to $90 billion, not million, $billion, it points to the incompetence of the government. It points to the fact that the government does not plan. Which government that is planning seriously would do a budget and then have to come back for $90+ billion to do what they want to do? And this is at the same time that they haven't spent a lot of what they asked for. David Patterson has put that in the public domain with much clarity. Guyanese should recognize that their resources are being mismanaged. They should recognize that there is no planning. And Barra Jack Dio treats this country as if it's his plantation. He just come way back from somewhere, the United Arab Emirates, and says to people, Ghana will get new ID cards. Is this his plantation? Is it a deal that he would have made that some people will benefit from? Was there any public tendering? Who determined from a technical standpoint that this is the best system for us to use? Or is it his view that he is God Almighty and whatever he does, the Guyanese people have got to live with? And this is worrying when Barra Jack Dio historically is linked to failure. This is a man who was given 32 billion Guyana dollars to find alternative employment and activities for the sugar workers. He destroyed the sugar industry. He cannot account, the government cannot account for the $32 billion, yet he can go off and come back telling Guyanese that he made some deal for ID cards. It makes little or no sense to me, except the government condones the corruption. And it does appear that while the president speaks about his one Guyana, he's in charge of no Guyana. Why is it in a country in which the president is elected, quotation marks, the vice president has to be making the major pronouncements, doing the press conference, as if the president isn't capable. I would expect that in a country like Guyana, where final responsibility lies with the president, then the president should be doing these things unless he is a puppet on a string. And mind you, while all of this has happened, let us recall that Minister Ashni Singh was charged. The government now decide that they will find a way around ministers doing what they want and then enjoy immunity. So Ashni Singh is not the finance minister. He's minister within the ministry, within the office of the president with responsibility for finance. What that means is that the president is the finance minister. And what they're trying to do is to give them the latitude to do as they like. And when the time comes for accountability, they will say it was the president, and the president has immunity. So the Guyanese people must see through this plot to steal Guyana's money while not facing the court in the final analysis. And when I saw the charges they claim to be bringing against Carol Smith-Joseph, I felt that the government felt, oh shucks, Ali got 19 charges, we must compete. Because it makes no sense. So we have got to keep our eyes on this corruption ball. Because the PPP is all about corruption. I see they're giving $900 and something million to a school that they built and rebuilt, and now a large set of money. All the actions you are seeing, they point to the activities of a corrupt government. And when you don't have accountability, particularly in the oil sector, you are bringing the Dutch disease on Guyana.
Just to build off of some of the points that my colleagues would have made there, one of the things that we want to make sure is clear as we talk about these salary increases is one, that healthcare workers need to have the facilities to actually help them to carry out their work in good working conditions, and not just that you give an increase but you don't match that with appropriate facilities. That's the first thing. The second thing that my learned colleague mentioned is that when it comes to police officers, is their work any less valuable than healthcare workers, than other segments of the public sector? But we kind of want to help Guyanese to understand some of the concrete reasons that you want public servants to have good pay, and that you want to have the type of people-centered vision that we have. I'll give you an example that you can chew on. At night, Guyanese may go out and enjoy themselves, but do Guyanese walk from bar to bar? If you're at Palm Court, are you going to walk to Pegasus? If you're at Palm Court, are you going to walk to Bistro? You're not going to do that because you're worried that you're going to be robbed. We have normalized things like that, whereas in other parts of the world, it is routine, it is normal that people will walk from bar to bar. Tourists especially are accustomed to that. And yet, tourists are routinely advised, whether it is by websites, whether it is by blogs, that you should not walk around Guyana at night. How can the government be taking the tourism industry seriously and not giving police officers the pay increase that they need to help them to do their job, not matching that with resources? And when we talk about our people-centered vision, helping to raise the income of people across the country, one of the benefits of that will be that it will cut down on the crime rate. There will be less petty crime. People will have less reason to be fearful for their lives. That will open up the tourism industry. That will assist in so many ways in opening up the economy of Guyana, the nighttime economy of Guyana. And people will feel comfortable walking from bar to bar and enjoying themselves in an evening. That is normal in other countries. It is strange that in Guyana here, you have to be at all times worried about it. Even if you look at Movie Town in Giffland, at 1 or 2 in the morning, are you going to walk from Movie Town to Giffland? You're worried. You're worried because we have accepted that. We no longer are going to be living like that. We shouldn't have been living like that in the first place, and now we have the resources to change that. We will unlock many industries by paying public servants well and providing them the resources to do their jobs. It's not just paying them for paying them's sake. What we're saying is there are huge benefits to Guyana from paying public servants what it is that they really should be getting. Thank you.
Thank you.
I also think we need to note the diplomatic community calling for inclusion. I mean, to me, that's a clear indication that notwithstanding the government's talk about providing evidence, people are moving around and seeing clearly that there is discrimination and there is exclusion. We will continue to engage the diplomatic community and make them au fait with what is happening. I've recently had an engagement with the Canadian High Commission, and we were able to give them information that they needed to make informed decisions. And we believe our work with the diplomatic community is important. Though we do not believe in interference in our domestic affairs, we understand diplomacy. We know there is a role for the diplomatic community, and we expect them to play that role in a very respectful way, while at the same time helping us to hold this regime accountable. Because whenever developing countries run into problems, it also has its impact on the developed country through migration, etc. So they should have an interest in ensuring good governance in Ghana, which unfortunately is not happening.
Thank you. I see the hand of Ms. Garnett.
Hi, good afternoon. Tamika Garnett, Ghana Chronicle.
Good afternoon.
I have a few questions. My first question, last week in the party statement, party member Mr. Critchlow questioned where the spending of the $3.2 billion allocated to the Ministry of Culture and Development for Sports. They noted that national athletes, including national boxer Keeving Alcock, had indicated that those billions have not gone into helping them. Mr. Alcock the following day released a statement where he explicitly described the Ministry of Culture, Youth and Sports as the most active, supportive, effective, and visionary that the country has ever seen, unquote. That was his exact words. He thanked the ministry, the minister, and the president for their support that they have given him. Is the party ready to offer Mr. Alcock an apology?
I did not see anywhere in the statement where that was attributed to Mr. Alcock. I think the government in its wickedness suggested that we were saying, that Mr. Alcock said that. I reread that press statement, and nowhere in the press statement I can recall us saying that Mr. Alcock said that. So that is the first clarification we need. Secondly, you would agree that a lot of Guyanese are vulnerable, and that the government continues to put pressure to them to make statements even some of them don't want to make. I would say to Mr. Alcock, the government misled you. You should go back, read the press statement, and see that we didn't say that. Even though I do acknowledge that there were criticisms of the government as it relates to the boxing team going overseas. So, on the one hand, the criticism were made of the government, but I think in the light of the usual pressure of the PPP, we find these positions being taken. But you haven't gone to the crux of the matter. The government has no sports policy. It has no culture policy. And that is what matters. If you are going to run a government, you have to have, I recall having to respond to young Ramson when he was an MP rampaging without evidence, that we had produced a youth policy and that the youth policy was tabled. Where is your youth policy? Where is Mr. Ramson's sport policy? Where is his culture policy? The issue here, you have a little chap running amok, believing that managing sports, culture, and youth is a social media affair. Let Mr. Ramson show us the millions he spent on training young people. Let him show us the projects for these monies. Mr. Ali Cock will not know those details. He would know it. And giving someone a statement doesn't solve the problem. If the minister wants to be useful, which might be very difficult, he can put down in writing the list of projects that they did, the money spent on it, and give us an idea of its impact on the youth. For instance, have they trained any youths in leadership so that they can lead themselves? Is there a literacy program like we had for young people who cannot read and write and are out of the school systems? Those are the critical issues that have to be dealt with by Charles Ramson, not running around the place taking pictures with men in sport, etc. That you mentioned that they went to Liverpool, dug up the ground, promised that they will fix the ground. The part of the fence that was good, they moved the zinc sheets from that, give somebody a contract, and they put chain link. Now the other side of the fence is in a state of disrepair. They could have fixed that and therefore ensure no animals can access the ground. But they chose to put money in the part that was already done, leave it open. They dug up the ground, left it just like that, and will come and say they spent money on the land live man ground. The reality is that money cannot impact the people because they cannot play on the ground. The only thing that's happening on the ground is some fish emerging in the pools, and I saw some goats and cows having a nice time. Charles Ramson, like Jack Deo, is a complete failure. There's nothing that he can show for the billions that are allegedly being spent on youth sport and culture. Additionally, you should have recognized that we pointed out in that press statement that he has virtually destroyed the creative arts in Guyana. He sought to impose a high fee for the use of the National Cultural Center. He imposed his personal involvement in which for somebody to rent the cultural center, the artists are contended that they have to engage him personally. Which minister that is useful and functioning will become involved in a trivial detail like the renting of the cultural center? And so I'm saying to you, there were many critical issues raised there that should be addressed. And if Charles Ramson wants to be useful, he can allow the god of the PPP, Jack Deo, to allow him to have a press conference so that people can ask him questions on this issue. So all I would say to you, the attempt is to deflect from what the reality is. We will focus the people on the reality.
And
Timika, I think I need to clarify something. You were saying that the statement did not specifically say that Mr. Ali Cobb indicated that money had not gone to help him. Is that what you're saying? That
What?
The APNU statement did not say that Mr. Ali Cobb had indicated.
My dear, I spoke in plain English language.
You kind of went off from the question I asked.
What is the question you asked?
Was that the statement said that national athletes, including national boxer Kevin Alicott, have indicated that those billions have not gone into helping them.
I don't recall that in the statement. I don't recall.
Are you currently reading these exact words from the statement that is posted recall that statement. Mr. Critchlow read it, and I am currently rereading the words that, as is right now, are on your official page. So you can't tell me that you can't recall those words. Someone needs to give you the statement because it is the party's words. If you don't give me the statement, that's not
I
my
want to
word.
answer the ineptitudes. Ganesh, go ahead.
Temika,
Yes.
I don't know why you're sounding a little hostile. I don't know why, but I thought I
Apologies for that.
worried that we were going to go ahead with this press conference without a question from you. But then you came around, so I'm happy about that. But you know, I wanted to say just now before you intervened
Yes.
that there's a critical part to that statement which I would love for you to give some attention to. And I trust.
No.
No, let me finish.
I don't think anybody's addressing my question. I understand you want to direct me as to what you want me to ask, but I am asking someone to address the question that I am asking, which is the party willing to offer Mr. Alikok an apology for what was said after he
Let me answer the question.
Statement was untrue.
Let me answer the question. I will go through the statement, and if the statement says that Mr. Alikok said that, I have no problem offering an apology. But what I know, and I think I did read the statement, we were pointing out that billions were there, and Mr. Alikok was able to point out that he didn't get the requisite assistance that were needed at the time. And so I will go through it after this press conference, and I'll get back on it at the next press conference.
So you're saying you're willing to apologize to Mr. Alikok?
I said, English language is simple. I said I will go it through, and immediately after that, at the next press conference, I will deal with the issue.
Yeah.
Please do not choose. Please do not choose language for me.
But one of the things
But
Let him go.
Elton,
Can I move on to my other question?
Tamika, there's a.
Yes, Mr. Mike.
I want to reiterate, for the sake of the nation's benefit, your benefit, and the Guyana Chronicle's benefit, that a critical part of last week's statement mentioned, and for the sake of reiteration, it ought to be repeated, that serious questions were being asked about the role of the minister's wife, Miss Alana Sibaran, who is allegedly acting in the capacity of culture advisor to the minister, who is playing an active role in planning and executing cultural events. Apart from the obvious conflict of interest and nepotism, the Guyanese people deserve to know whether the minister's wife is employed by the ministry, if she is being paid, and what are the terms of her agreement. Members of staff in the ministry are concerned about the diminished role of the Director of Culture, who is qualified and employed to function in that capacity and perform many of the tasks that are being performed by the minister's wife. So for reiteration, since you took us back to the statement, I was happy about that, because it gave me the opportunity to repeat that it was brought to our attention that his wife is playing a critical role as his advisor, and we, the people of Guyana, deserve to know if she's being paid, her amount, and if it is in his eyes, it's a conflict of interest.
May I also advise that the Guyana National Newspaper Limited, that NCN, all of them are the property of the people of Guyana, and they are expected to hold both government and opposition accountable. Unfortunately, it does appear that when the Guyana Chronicle and NCN come to these activities, they can be vocal at our press conferences, which we welcome. I enjoy answering the questions, but we're a little worried that they eat every stick when it comes to the government, especially Barry Jack Dew's press conference. I had the opportunity to look at the press conference and recognize that there was absolute silence. Please begin to operate as if you are utilizing the people's resources, and therefore you need to operate on behalf of the people rather than coming over as a partisan, rather than performing the function that the state media is supposed to perform. May I also say to you that under the laws of Guyana, The opposition is part of the governance mechanism, and they are entitled to coverage as the government. I thought I should mention that in passant.
Thank you very much. Just if I could quickly, clarify something for Ms.
Norton just said.
Take charge of this press
He
conference.
mentioned that.
Ms. Garnett? Elson?
Yeah, one thing that I just wanted to point out to the Guyanese people, just so we have some clarity around this issue, because me about is the management of the sports sector, the government's investment in the sports sector, and whether or not the government is actually putting the resources towards the sports sector that it should, the Culture, Youth and Sport Ministry. You'll observe that this year's budget, which we've stressed again and again, is 50% larger than last year's. It's the first oil budget. But I have here before me two articles. One is from the DPI and the other is from the Guyana Chronicle. It says that in 2021, the budget for sport, culture, youth, and sport was $3.5 billion. And in 2022, the budget for the Culture, Youth, and Sport Ministry was only $3.2 billion. So can you imagine that the budget is 50% bigger, but the allocation to culture, youth, and sport has actually fallen? That at all indicates that the government has an interest in culture, youth, and sport in this country. The budget, if we were to say that culture, youth, and sport activities are just as important this year as they were last year, should be 50% bigger. Why is it that the government's allocation towards that ministry has not only remained the same, but has actually fallen? That is the clearest indication that you're going to find is not interested in the development of sports and of culture in Guyana. Rather, it has its interest in other areas, and as we've expressed before, that's in stealing as much as is possible to steal.
All right, thank you. I will allow Ms. Garnett, since we're running out of time, I allow you I think it's two other questions you asked without us necessarily having a long back and forth as we go forward.
No, okay.
Go ahead.
The National Newspaper Limited and NCN come to these activities. They can be vocal at our press conferences, but when it comes to the press conferences for Dr. Jacquio and talking to the president, you hear silence.
Never said that either. I said you ate ever stick. I said you ate ever stick.
Ever stick. Oh, I was reading that and I thought maybe I mispronounced something. I thought that was a mistake. Yeah, well, that's what it said.
You don't need.
I thought that was a mistake. I wrote that down by mistake. Anyway, yes, you said ever stick. Dr. Parajagio held a press conference on Friday, and I asked several questions as to issues that he spoke about. I don't like this idea that you're saying that we don't ask questions. Whenever the president is at an event and the media is asking questions, I very often ask several questions. I personally write several stories that pertain to
Ms. Garnett?
Like the coach.
questions.
Okay. You need to go over. We didn't hear. You need to go over. We didn't hear what you were saying. We thought you were cut off.
Mute for a while.
Yes. Oh, apparently I was. I'm just saying, I think it is false for Mr. Norton to be saying that we do not ask questions of the government.
You're true?
No, I think
I keep getting cut off. But
we left Chronicle with good internet.
That is what I wanted to say about that, because we do ask questions of them. We do ask questions of the oppositions. We ask questions of the state, of the governing members of the government. And we do write stories about the opposition in addition to writing stories about the government. My next question is about the Local Content Advisory Council, and a follow-up to what Ms. Davina spoke about earlier. Mr. Norton said that he did not receive the correspondence from the Minister of Natural Resources in terms of requesting a nominee for the Local Content Advisory Council. Does the opposition then intend to take any proactive step, perhaps, and then write the Natural Resources Minister about their nominee or take any step towards putting forth your nominee? Because the minister is saying he wrote the opposition's office, the leader of the opposition's office. And yeah, and Mr. Norton is saying that he did not receive the correspondence. So can Mr. Norton say what then is the next step to the opposition getting their nominee on the Local Content Advisory Council, given that it's the Local Content Advisory Council is being held up, awaiting the opposition's nominee?
When I receive the letter, I will deal with it. That's the thing first. The second thing I want to say, it is not only when you're part of the state media, it's not only for you to ask questions, but it is also for you to report what the opposition says. And many times we find that what is done is a search for those that satisfy the government, reported, but the other points that are made that are advancing the cause of the people of Guyana, we don't see it. I invite you to send us one of the articles you wrote in which you pointed out this is what the opposition said on an issue.
Also, Ms. Garnett, I believe the comment made by the leader of the opposition is very important. I personally don't believe that the NCN or the Chronicle operates in any manner similar to the BBC, in which you would see journalists asking searching and critical questions against the British government and its programs and policies. For example, I believe that the issue of Sue and the alleged allegations in relation to the Vice President are questions of the highest importance. They are questions that go to the national interest. And I will await also to be informed of proof of NCN's proactive intervention and advocacy on the part of the Guyanese people in pursuing those similar questions. The use and allocation of the resources. I don't see NCN or the Chronicle engaging in any in-depth analysis about the allocation or the misallocation of resources of the Guyanese people. And so let us not always take the position that we come here every Tuesday to be combative with the media. We want to work with the media, and we want to exhort and use this opportunity as an exhortation for the media, especially the state media, to engage in a more proactive and vibrant examination of the government policies.
All right. I think, Ms. Tamiki, you had one other question, or that's it?
My other question
Your final
was
question.
about the Natural Resources Commission, similar to the Advisory Council. And when we were last reported, it was reported in August, I'm not sure if there's an update, that the National Resource Fund Investment Committee had not received a nominee from the opposition. Can Mr. Norton address if that situation has already been addressed?
It is true that we did not submit. It is true that we did not submit a representative. You must remember we have a matter before the court on this issue, and therefore we will make a judgment as to whether it is in the interest of the people of Guyana for us to submit or wait the outcome of the judgment to the court.
All right, thank you so much. All right, at this time, I want to thank our media personnel for attending today's press conference and the viewers for staying with us today. We hope that you do have a wonderful afternoon.